Hello and welcome to my channel. So now we will learn about the brainstem. The brainstem, which is a crucial and intricate part of the central nervous system, serves as a bridge between the brain and the spinal cord. It plays a fundamental role despite its relatively small size compared to the rest of the brain. The brainstem encompasses a vast array of nuclei, pathways, and structures that contribute to various physiological processes and support human life. In this comprehensive exploration, we will delve into the anatomy, function, development, connectivity, and clinical significance of the brain stem, unraveling its complexities and elucidating its pivotal role in maintaining homeostasis and supporting neurological function. Now it comes the anatomy of the brain stem. The brain stem is composed of three main regions. First is the midbrain, which is mesencephalon. Second is the pons, and the third one is medulla oblongata. Each region has distinct structures and functions, and together they form the conduit for nerve fibers traveling between the brain and spinal cord. First is the midbrain, which is mesencephalon. Positioned at the topmost part of the brain stem, the midbrain serves as a conduit for ascending and descending pathways carrying sensory and motor information. Key structures within the midbrain include the cerebral peduncles, which contain motor fibers traveling to and from the cerebrum, and the tectum, which comprises the superior and inferior colliculi involved in the visual and auditory processing, respectively. The midbrain also houses the nuclei involved in motor control, such as the red nucleus and substantia nigra, as well as nuclei involved in regulating arousal and sleep wake cycles. Next is pons. Situated between the midbrain and the medulla oblongata, the pons serves as a relay station for tracks traveling between the cerebrum, cerebellum, and spinal cord. Key structure within the pons include the pontine nuclei, which relay information between the cerebrum and cerebellum, and the pontine tegmentum, which contains ascending and descending pathways involved in the sensory and motor functions. The pons also houses nuclei involved in regulating respiration, including the pontine respiratory group, which coordinates breathing patterns in response to changes in oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. Next is medulla oblongata. It is located at the base of the brainstem. The medulla oblongata is continuous with the spinal cord and serves as a crucial center for automatic functions and vital reflexes. Key structure within the medulla oblongata include the pyramids, which contain descending motor tracts originating in the cerebral cortex and traveling to the spinal cord, and the medullary reticular formation, which regulates arousal, consciousness, and autonomic functions. The medulla also houses nuclei involved in the controlling cardiovascular and respiratory functions, including the cardiac, vasomotor, and respiratory centers, which regulate heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing. Function of the brainstem. The brainstem plays a vital role in regulating various physiological processes essential for life, including respiration, cardiovascular function, consciousness, and sleep wake cycles. Its functions can be broadly categorized into several domains. First is regulation of respiration. The brainstem contains nuclei involved in the regulating breathing patterns and responding to changes in blood oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. The respiratory centers within the medulla oblongata includes the dorsal respiratory group and ventral respiratory group, coordinate rhythmic breathing by generating signals that control the activity of respiratory muscles. The pontine respiratory group in the pons modulates breathing patterns in response to input from higher brain centers, helping to regulate the rate and depth of breathing during different physiological states. Next is the control of cardiovascular function. The brainstem contains nuclei involved in regulating heart rate, blood pressure, and blood flow to various organs. The cardiac center within the medulla oblongata regulates the heart rate and cardiac output by adjusting the activity of the autonomic nervous system and sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways. The vasomotor center in the medulla oblongata, it controls the blood vessel diameter and blood pressure by modulating vascular tone and smooth muscle contraction. Next is integration of sensory and motor pathways. The brainstem serves as a relay center for sensory and motor pathways traveling between the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the spinal cord. Sensory information from the body, including touch, proprioception, pain, and temperature, is relayed through ascending pathways in the brainstem to higher brain centers for processing and interpretation. Motor commands originating in the cerebral cortex and cerebellum travel through descending pathways in the brainstem to spinal motor neurons, coordinating voluntary movements and reflex responses. Regulation of consciousness and arousal. The brainstem contains nuclei involved in regulating consciousness, arousal, and sleep wake cycles. The reticular formation, a network of interconnected nuclei spanning the brainstem, plays a crucial role in maintaining wakefulness, alertness, and attention by modulating the activity of cortical and thalamic neurons. Disruption of brainstem function, such as the damage to the reticular activating system, can lead to the disorder of consciousness, including coma, stupor, and persistent vegetative state. Next is the development of the brain stem. The brain stem undergoes intricate developmental during embryogenesis involving the formation, migration, and differentiation of neural progenitor cells. Key stages of brainstem development include: first is neurogenesis. Neural progenitor cells within the ventricular zone of developing brainstem give rise to neurons, glial cells, and other neural cell types through mitosis and cell fate specification. Next is migration. Newly generated neurons migrate from the ventricular zone to their final destinations within the brainstem, guided by chemical cues and radial glial cells. Next is circuit formation. Neurons within the developing brainstem establish the synaptic connection with each other and with neurons in other brain regions, forming the functional circuits essential for sensory processing, motor control, and autonomic regulation. Next is synaptogenesis. During the postnatal development, synapses between neurons within the brainstem it undergo the refinement and maturation, contributing to the establishment of precise neural circuits and functional connectivity. Disruption in the brainstem development, whether due to genetic mutation, prenatal insults, or environmental factors, can lead to the structural abnormalities and functional deficits, affecting the vital physiological processes and neurological function. Next is the connectivity of the brainstem. The brainstem is intricately connected to other brain regions via ascending and descending pathways, allowing for bidirectional communication between the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the spinal cord. Major connection of the brainstem include: first is ascending pathway. Sensory information from the body is relayed through the ascending pathways in the brainstem to higher brain centers, including the thalamus and cerebral cortex, for processing and interpretation. Next is the descending pathways. Motor commands originating in the cerebral cortex and cerebellum travel through the descending pathways in the brainstem to spinal motor neurons, regulating voluntary movements and reflex responses. Next is intra-brainstem connections. The brainstem contains numerous nuclei and fiber tracts that interconnect different regions within the brainstem, facilitating coordination of sensory and motor functions, autonomic regulation, and consciousness. Last is the clinical significance of the brainstem. Disorders affecting the brainstem can have profound implications for neurological function and overall health. Some common brainstem related disorders and their clinical manifestation include stroke and vascular lesions. Brainstem strokes and vascular lesions can disrupt blood flow to the brainstem, leading to the neurological deficits such as motor weakness, sensory loss, dysarthria, and cranial nerve dysfunction. Next is traumatic brain injury. Severe traumatic brain injury involving the brainstem can result in coma, vegetative state, and other disorders of consciousness depending on the extent and the location of the injury. Next is inflammatory and infectious conditions. Inflammatory and infectious conditions affecting the brainstem, such as encephalitis, meningitis, and multiple sclerosis, can cause neurological symptoms such as fever, headache, cranial nerve palsies, and impaired consciousness. Next is neurodegenerative diseases. Neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson disease, multiple system atrophy, and progressive supranuclear palsy can affect the brainstem nuclei and pathways, leading to motor dysfunction, autonomic disturbances, and cognitive impairment. In summary, the brainstem is a vital and multifunctional structure essential for regulating basic life sustaining functions, integrating sensory and motor pathways, and maintaining consciousness and arousal. Its complex anatomy, diverse functions, and extensive connectivity underscore its pivotal role in human physiology and neurological health. Further research into the mechanisms underlying brainstem function and dysfunction holds promise for advancing our understanding of neurological disorders and developing effective treatments to improve the patient outcomes.